In June of 2022, a newlywed couple checked into a rental cabin near the edge of Moss Hollow, Montana. By morning, they were gone. No struggle, no footprints, no broken glass, just an unlocked door, a faint smell of bleach, and the bedroom pillows arranged like someone still expected them to come back. The search came up empty, and for a year, no one had an answer. Until I booked the same cabin, under a false name, with a 38 and a question no one had answered. What happened to my sister? Before we begin, hit subscribe to help uncover stories they tried to bury, and make sure no name stays forgotten. My name's Evelyn Cross. I'm 42 years old. I grew up in Idaho, spent most of my working life in Detroit, and now I don't really belong anywhere. Before everything happened, I was a trauma nurse. Night shift. 12-hour blocks of blood and screaming, followed by cheap coffee and 3 hours of sleep in a cold apartment. I liked it in a strange way. The routine, the control, the predictability of chaos. My younger sister Harper. She was the opposite. Soft-spoken, bright. She believed in things, weddings, homemade centerpieces, handwritten vows. She met Ryan at a craft brewery in Boulder, fell in love in under 3 months, and by spring they were planning a honeymoon road trip through Montana. They were supposed to be in Glacier for the first leg, but Harper wanted something quieter. She found a place online, a rental cabin in a town neither of us had ever heard of. She sent me a picture. Said it had a wraparound porch, no cell service, a fireplace that looked like something out of a Christmas card. I told her it looked like the kind of place where people disappear. I was joking. They checked in June 18th, a Saturday. The last photo Harper sent was of her bare feet on the dashboard, Ryan's hand tangled in hers, forest blurring past the windshield. She looked happy, tired maybe, but happy. I didn't hear from her after that. I figured it was just the signal. No bars, she'd said. That's the point. 3 days later, I got a call. From the rental agency. The owners had found the cabin unlocked. No one inside. No luggage, no Jeep. Just a faint chemical smell and one set of wine glasses on the sink. The sheriff called it a disappearance. Said they probably got lost on a hike. But Harper hated hiking. I flew out the next morning. They showed me the property, let me walk through the space. Everything looked staged, like a showroom. The bed made too neatly, the fridge empty but polished, a place scrubbed not out of cleanliness but guilt. I remember standing in the center of that quiet, picture-perfect cabin thinking something's wrong, but I didn't have proof. Just a feeling in my gut that didn't go away. The sheriff told me to go home, so I did. But I didn't forget. And 11 months later I came back. Same cabin, different name, same porch steps, different set of questions. The owner wasn't expecting me early, and when I stepped inside, the first thing I smelled wasn't pine. It was lemon and bleach. The first thing I noticed was how still everything felt. No wind, no bird song, no hum of insects. Just the sound of my boots on polished wood and the faint creak of old beams settling in the heat. The inside of the cabin looked exactly like it had in the rental photos, maybe too exact. Couch pillows aligned. Coffee table magazines fanned out evenly. No signs of anyone ever truly staying there. I dropped my bags by the door and took a slow walk around the place. 1 bedroom, 1 bath, open kitchen. Clean to the point of sterile. The scent of lemon cleaner hung in the air just like it had a year ago. Only stronger now. The mattress still had that same stiff edge. I ran my hand along it. The bed frame didn't creak. The windows looked out onto nothing but dense pine and early summer fog. I didn't unpack. That first night I kept the lights low. Sat near the fire with my voice recorder on and a notepad in my lap. I called it day 1. Logged the layout, what looked different, what felt off. Around 10 p.m., I thought I heard movement on the porch. A step, maybe 2. I stood still. Heart steady, breath shallow. Then came the knock. 4 taps. Not rushed, not frantic, just slow, intentional. I didn't move to the peephole. I just opened the door. He was taller than I remembered from the interviews. Wiry in his 60s, sun-scorched skin clothes worn thin from use. He smiled like he didn't mean it. Said his name was Don Blandon. I already knew that. He asked if I'd gotten in okay. Said he didn't expect anyone until morning. I told him the roads were clear, and he nodded. Asked if I had any questions about the trails. I said I might go for a hike. He told me the fog rolls in fast and people get turned around. Said there'd been a couple last year who went out and never came back. His eyes didn't blink when he said it. His hands stayed in his pockets. I told him I'd be careful. He paused, glanced toward the trees, then back at me. That perfume, he said. It's familiar. I hadn't worn perfume, not in weeks, but Harper had. I thanked him, closed the door, and locked it. Deadbolt chain, then a chair beneath the handle. I didn't sleep. I sat with the gun in my lap and watched the windows until morning. By sunrise, I'd decided to start with the fireplace. The grout between the hearthstones was discolored in places, charred but not from wood, looked more like fabric or hair. I noted it, then checked the bed frame. That's where I found the first real sign. 4 gouges under the frame, tight together, parallel. Not scratches, not from furniture, from fingers. Someone had clawed at the wood hard enough to leave splinters. My hand trembled just a little as I traced one of the grooves. I'd seen defensive wounds. I'd documented assault injuries. These were that, and they'd been cleaned around, bleached, carefully. Around noon, I started walking the perimeter. The back of the cabin sloped into a shallow drainage run. Tree roots broke the soil where the ground got soft. I nearly missed it, a patch of earth that didn't sit right. The texture was looser, disturbed, maybe from rain, maybe not. I used my knife to probe a few inches down and hit fabric. Pulled up a silver button, scratched but still shiny. I knew that button. It had come from the cuff of Harper's favorite denim jacket. I bagged it, took photos, marked the spot. That night I sat by the fire again. The room felt smaller now, the silence heavier. I poured a shot of vodka but didn't drink it, just stared at the glass. Around midnight I heard movement again. Something fast running past the back window. I grabbed the pistol, checked the doors. Nothing. Then just before 2 a.m. came the whisper. Right behind me. Evie. No one was there. I played the last 5 minutes on my recorder. Fire crackling. My breath. And that same voice, soft, deliberate. Evie. Not Harper's voice, a man's. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I sent Marcos a message from the burner found button. Heard voice. Confirm sheriff notes. Any updates on Don? No reply yet. Around 10:30, another knock, this time firmer. A voice called out, Miss Green. I stayed behind the curtain. Just checking in. Had some bears get into trash bins near my trail. It was Don again. I cracked the door. He smiled. Said he remembered me asking about trails in my booking form. I hadn't. He asked if I'd be heading out. I said, maybe. He nodded, then paused. You know the couple last year real sweet. Shame what happened. Nature's cruel when you're careless. Then he looked at me. You wearing that same perfume again? I closed the door without answering. Waited until he walked off. Then I searched the cabin again. This time the pantry. Everything was too neat, too full. Behind the canned goods I found a small crate. Inside rope, duct tape, spare batteries, and beneath that a faded Polaroid. Harper. Face pale, eyes wide, fear frozen into the moment. Behind her a man in a mask, painted bone white, antlers branching out like some grotesque crown. I labeled the photo, sealed it in a bag, logged it with my recorder. Then I saw the rug. Bear hide, too centered, too perfectly laid out. I pulled it back, found the trap door. It wasn't hidden, just forgotten. The hinges groaned when I lifted it. Flashlight in one hand, pistol in the other, I climbed down. The crawl space ran the full length of the cabin, maybe 3 feet high. The air was thick mildew dust and something else. Decay. Toward the far wall I found it. Clothing. Torn denim. A necklace I'd given Harper 5 Christmases ago. A boot. Then a rib. Smooth, pale, unmistakably human. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I backed out slow, replaced the rug, and called Marcos. He picked up on the 3rd ring. I found her, I said. Crawl space. Polaroid. Bones. She didn't leave. She died here. He told me to sit tight. He'd get someone outside the county. FBI. State police. I agreed. Then the signal dropped. I stayed in the dark for the next hour, every light off, every curtain drawn. That photo, that voice, it had been real. The scratch marks, the bleach, the watchful calm in Don's eyes. He hadn't cleaned up a crime scene. He'd set a trap, and I wasn't the first to walk into it. After the call dropped, I waited in silence. 43 minutes. Then I tried Marcos again. Nothing. No bars. I checked the recorder. Still running. Battery holding. I logged everything I'd seen, the necklace, the gouges in the bed frame, the button from Harper's jacket, the photo, and the bone. I didn't say her name out loud. Not yet. Not until I had a second voice to say it back to me. I left the trapdoor covered, packed the camera and photo into my duffel. I didn't touch the bones again. Didn't need to. Anyone with eyes and a flashlight could see what was down there. But I knew how this would go. A woman walks in, says she found a body under the floor. Says the property owner gave her a strange look. Says she heard a voice. There was only one way this would be taken seriously. I had to walk it in. I drove into town. Moss Hollow doesn't have a police department. Just a few trucks with county decals parked outside the gas station across from a diner with one open sign and no customers. I went to the Homestead County substation. One officer on duty, early 50s, wedding ring, heavy step. He looked up when I walked in, nodded like he was already tired. Asked if I was reporting damage to property. I told him no. Told him I needed to speak to someone about a potential crime scene near Moss Hollow Trail. He blinked slow. Said I'd have to file something in writing. I asked if Sheriff Halbrook was available. He wasn't. I handed over the bagged button and the photograph. Told the officer my sister had disappeared from that cabin 1 year ago, that she never checked out, that I had a journal and audio confirming something was buried underneath the house. He stared at the photo, then at me, said it looked like it could be photoshopped, asked if I had a record. That was the tone. That was the pace. He asked why I didn't contact the sheriff directly. I told him I had, a year ago, when Harper first went missing. He asked if I had new information. I pointed to the photograph. He said without a body it wasn't evidence. Just fear. Just grief. I left before I said something I couldn't walk back. Back in the truck, I called Marcos again. Still no signal. I tried sending a voice memo, but the file wouldn't upload. I sat there in the parking lot watching the officer return to his desk, eyes already down again, like none of it mattered. That night, I went through Harper's last messages. She'd sent me a voice clip from the cabin. Just 6 seconds. Laughter. Wind. Ryan's voice in the background asking if the bottle was corked or twist off. Normal. Mundane. It made my stomach hurt. That was the last sound I had of her. I checked the trapdoor again. Still sealed. Still undisturbed. I didn't sleep. By morning, I'd made a decision. If no one was going to move, I would. I started by mapping the property. Used trail markers, orange tape, GPS pins on a topographic app. I knew the cabin was just one piece. The way Dawn had spoken the couple from last year, like it was nothing that stuck with me. This wasn't random. This had happened before. I opened the case files Marcos had sent weeks ago. 6 missing couples, all tourists, all vanished within state lines over the past decade. Most were written off as lost hikers, travel miscommunications, runaways. But the locations lined up. Glacier, Flathead, Whitefish. And one case tied directly to Moss Hollow, a couple from Wisconsin who never made it past their first night. No note, no footprints. No. Their rental had been booked through a management group called Stone Elk Rentals. I traced the registry info, registered to a post office box off Moss Hollow Trail. I cross-referenced the dates with the journal I'd found under the floor. The names were there, faded but legible. 1 couple per year. Their names, dates, room numbers. The last entry, Harper and Ryan, 2022. And beneath that, just one more line written in fresh ink green, 2023. My alias, my booking. The knock came around noon. Not at the door this time. From the side of the house, soft, intentional. I didn't answer. I watched from the window as Don stepped into view, hands in his pockets. His shirt looked freshly washed. He didn't look angry, just calm. Too calm. He called out, asked if I'd seen the deer tracks near the trail bend, said they were fresh, could mean a buck nearby. I didn't respond. He stood there a little longer, then turned to leave. Before he stepped off the porch, he said something. I heard it through the wall. Some folks come here and forget who they are, but the woods remember. That night I slept with the pistol in one hand and the recorder in the other. I kept the lights off, left the blinds open. If he was watching, I wanted him to see I wasn't moving. Just after 2 a.m., I heard something thump onto the roof. Then a slow scratch. Not animal, not random. Long, steady drags across the metal. Like claws or fingers. I didn't go outside. At 5:16, the signal returned. 1 bar. I got a message from Marcos. Just 4 words. He's not working alone. Then the screen cut out again. I didn't know it then, but Ray Delane had been spotted. Twice. Once in Idaho, sitting alone in a diner, face caught in a live stream's reflection. And again at a pawn shop in Missoula selling a men's watch. Harper had given that watch to Ryan on their wedding day. The engraving said to Ryan, forever. The clerk remembered the man's eyes, said he didn't give a name, just took the cash and left. When the FBI got there, he was already gone. That same night, I found a hidden letter wedged behind the floor joists. Not Don's handwriting. Sharper. Uneven. It read, "She wasn't supposed to be yours. She was mine first. I watched her. I waited. You stole her. I should have killed you too. Next time I will." Signed, R.D. I didn't show that letter to the sheriff. Not yet. I needed to understand what I was dealing with, because this wasn't just Don's sickness. Someone else had been watching Harper before the cabin, and someone else was watching me now. I stayed at the cabin longer than I should have. Part of me was waiting for the call from Marcos to come through again. Part of me didn't trust what would happen if I left. I'd already seen what the local sheriff thought of my evidence. I couldn't risk someone sweeping in to clean it up while I was gone. So I stayed. I watched. I kept recording. The mornings were cold and gray, the kind of cold that clung to your skin even after the sun came up. I stopped sleeping through the night. Instead, I paced the cabin. I reviewed my notes. I played back audio clips, again and again. Not because I thought I missed something, but because I needed to hear Harper's name. I needed it spoken aloud, even if it was only my voice saying it. The smell inside the cabin never faded. Not really. Lemon, bleach, ammonia. I cleaned the same kitchen counters twice a day, even though I never used them. It wasn't about the mess. It was about control. About routine. Something familiar to ground me. I kept going back to the journal, the one I'd found buried beneath the crawl space inside a rusted metal box. 12 couples. Dates, initials, sometimes full names. Some written in pen, some carved lightly in pencil. I recognized 2 names from National Missing Persons reports. One was a pair from Texas who'd vanished in 2016. Another from Minnesota in 2019. No one had connected them, not publicly. The list ended with Harper and Ryan. Their names weren't faded like the others. They looked fresh. But there was one more name below theirs. Green, 2023. That wasn't Harper. That was me. My booking. My alias. I sat at the table and stared at that line for nearly an hour. It meant he'd known I was coming before I got here. He knew the name I used, the fake job, the cover story. I hadn't slipped. He'd been watching. Maybe from the moment I checked in. Maybe earlier. That night I heard movement again, closer than before. Not on the roof this time, inside the walls. I followed the sound to the far corner near the bedroom. There was a narrow seam in the baseboard thinner than a dime, but it ran from one side of the room to the other. I pried it open with a screwdriver and found nothing but dust and insulation. Still, I left it cracked. Just in case. I started hearing her in my dreams. Harper. Sometimes laughing, sometimes calling my name. Once I dreamed she was standing beside the fire in a white dress, soaking wet dirt on her arms. She didn't speak, just stared at me with a look I'd never seen on her face, like she knew I had come too late. I kept my pistol loaded, but I started sleeping with the hunting knife instead. Smaller, easier to reach. I stopped showering at night, only in daylight, and never with the door closed. I stopped eating much too. Crackers, instant coffee, things I could open quietly. By the 4th night, I started documenting things no one else would have noticed. The way the fog settled lower on the back trail, the small drag marks behind the shed, the broken branch 8 feet off the ground. I kept track of everything, even if I didn't know what it meant yet. On the 5th morning, I returned to the clearing behind the cabin. I hadn't gone back since finding the disturbed soil, but I needed to know how far it went. There were more mounds than I remembered. 8, maybe 9. Each one shaped like a dome covered in sticks and old leaves. At the base of one, I saw something white pressed against the dirt. I brushed it off. Jawbone, clean, smooth. I didn't touch it again. I took a photo, bagged a nearby pebble for GPS reference, and marked the tree beside it with red tape. At the far end of the clearing, I found a newer grave. The soil wasn't packed yet. There was a shovel beside it. Nothing around it looked disturbed except one small glint of metal. I reached in and pulled out a wristwatch. Scratched, but still ticking. I turned it over. To Ryan. Forever. That was the engraving Harper had chosen. I dropped to my knees. I didn't cry. I just sat there holding the watch, staring at that half-dug grave, knowing exactly who it was meant for. Then I heard the twig snap. I turned and saw Don. He wasn't holding a weapon. He didn't look surprised, just calm like he always did. He took a step forward and said, "You should have left when you had the chance." I fired. The shot missed. He lunged. We hit the ground hard. I clawed at his face, kicked him in the ribs, screamed. He pinned me with one arm across my throat. I reached down, fumbled for the knife, and stabbed upward. It caught him just below the ribs. He howled, pulled back. Not down, not out. Just injured. I scrambled to my feet, grabbed the pistol again, and aimed. He was gone, limping into the trees, bleeding but moving fast. I didn't follow. I couldn't. I collapsed beside the fresh grave and tried to breathe. He had the watch. He had the names. He'd known I was coming. And now he knew I'd found his place. Later I managed to drag myself back to the cabin, locked every door, recovered the journal, the photo, the recordings. I sat on the floor for hours, barely blinking. The pain came in waves, head, shoulder, ribs. But I stayed quiet. I didn't call for help. Not yet. Just before dawn, something shifted in the ceiling. A thud, then slow scraping, the same sound I'd heard 3 nights earlier. This time it was closer, directly above the bed. I didn't look up. I sat there in the dark, one hand on the pistol, the other holding Harper's necklace, waiting for the next sound. It didn't come, but I knew it would. Because Dawn wasn't the only one in those woods, and someone else had started leaving things behind. I stayed inside for most of that day. The knife wound I gave Don might have slowed him down, but it didn't stop him, and I had no way of knowing whether he'd come back alone or bring someone with him. The air inside the cabin was thick, still holding the smell of lemon cleaner and old wood. I opened one window just an inch to cut the stale. My hand was still shaking, not from fear, from clarity, the kind that comes when you stop guessing and start knowing. Don had buried people behind this cabin. That much was clear. But he hadn't just buried them. He'd kept parts. Late afternoon, I went back into the crawl space. I brought gloves this time, a mask, thick garbage bags. I needed to see the rest. The air below was worse than before. It smelled like old, sweat-wet drywall and something sour that had soaked into the dirt. I moved slowly, crawling careful not to kick up dust. The beam from my flashlight caught a pair of boots in the corner women's cracked leather mud-caked. I bagged them. Next to them, a Christmas necklace I recognized from an old photo of Harper back when she worked at the animal clinic. It had a little bronze charm shaped like a dog paw. I kept going. There were bits of fabric buried in layers denim cotton, something that looked like tulle. I brushed them back with my gloved hand, caught the curve of a broken zipper, a belt buckle, a plastic bead. Then I found the wallet. Half rotted, mold creeping through the folds. Inside was an ID. Name Stephen Miles. One of the men from the Minnesota couple who disappeared in 2020. I bagged it, labeled it. That was the first official ID that tied this to someone besides my sister. I knew Marcos could use it to escalate, but I still didn't have a signal. Near the rear foundation wall, just above the dirt line, there was a square patch of wood that looked different. Lighter. Dry. I pressed against it. It shifted. Not a wall. A panel. Behind it, a small cavity lined with a torn wool blanket. And inside that, a metal box wrapped in duct tape. I cut it open. What I found wasn't just sick, it was deliberate. Inside were Ziploc bags labeled by year. Some held hair, some teeth. Others had jewelry, wedding rings mostly. 2 of them still locked together. There were batteries, a roll of undeveloped film, and a Polaroid camera. Under that, something wrapped in cloth. I unfolded it slowly. A leather-bound journal. Black cover. Corners worn. I flipped it open. Each page had a name, then a date, then a location. Harper and Ryan, June 2022, Cabin 3. Miles and Jordan, August 2020, Whitefish. Silva and Taryn, July 2019. Flathead, 12 couples, over a span of more than a decade. At the very bottom, the final line, not in pen, but in pencil. Fresh. Green, June 2023. Cabin 3. He'd written down my fake name, my booking, before I ever walked through the door. I closed the journal, bagged it, and started backing out. As I climbed up from the crawl space, I heard it again. Footsteps, slow, measured, on the porch. Then silence. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just waited. Watched the doorknob. Nothing. I shut the trap door, pulled the rug back over it. I sat on the floor, eyes locked on the front door, for at least an hour. The forest outside had gone quiet again. No birds, no wind. I turned off the lights, sat down at the table, laid everything out, camera, film ID, the metal box, the journal. I took pictures of each item front and back, logged them on my recorder. My voice was hoarse. Then I paused. Something about the journal wasn't right. I flipped back to the page with Harper and Ryan. Just beneath it, faint but still visible, there was a scribble. Looked like it had been erased, then rewritten. I held it up to the lamp. Couldn't make out all the letters. Just a partial phrase. She screamed for him. Not her. Him. That matched what I'd dreamed 2 nights earlier. Harper screaming not for herself, but for Ryan. I tried not to think about that. But something about the phrasing bothered me. It didn't feel like Dawn's words. It felt more personal. I opened the envelope with the hidden letter I'd found in the wall days earlier. The one signed R.D. The handwriting didn't match the journal's main entries, but it matched that faint scribble. That's when it hit me. 2 sets of handwriting. 2 tones. 2 patterns of thought. Dawn had kept the journal like a record, cold, organized. But someone else had written over it like they were trying to be heard. The letter from R.D. hadn't just been a warning. It was possession. She was mine first. You stole her. That night I slept in the corner of the kitchen back against the wall, everything bagged and packed in case I had to run. The next morning I drove half a mile out to the edge of the forest where the signal sometimes flickered in. 1 bar. Enough. I texted Marcos. Found ID. Journal. Film. Crawlspace trophies. Confirmed 12 victims. My name was last entry. Also found separate handwriting. Someone else wrote. She was mine first. Same RD signature. I need federal backup. Not local. He replied 6 minutes later. Already flagged to task force. FBI will route through Bozeman. Don't engage. Sit tight. I'm getting help. I turned off the phone and buried it inside my coat. Then I drove back. Sat in the truck for 20 minutes before I went inside. The cabin hadn't been touched, but I still checked every door, every bolt, every window, because the knock would come again, and next time it wouldn't be Dawn. The knock didn't come that night, but something else did. Around 2 a.m., I heard the floor shift above me. Just once. Wait. Deliberate. Then nothing. I stayed in the crawlspace corner back, pressed to the foundation wall, flashlight off. It was too late to run. If someone was already inside, I'd never make it to the truck. I waited. 15 minutes, maybe longer. When I finally eased the trapdoor open and slid into the main room, it was quiet. Cabin unchanged. But something in the air felt wrong, like someone had just stepped out. I checked every window, every latch. I didn't see anyone, but I knew I wasn't alone anymore. The next morning I repacked my duffel. Left the important things near the door, the metal box, the ID, the Polaroids, the journal. I put the knife back in my boot, loaded the pistol, and zipped it into the side of my jacket. Then I walked the tree line behind the cabin. There were tracks, not boots, running shoes, lighter. A different stride than Dawn's. They curved off behind a downed fence over a rock bed and disappeared toward a thicket I hadn't noticed before. I followed them halfway in, then stopped. Someone had used this path before, maybe a dozen times. Grass broken in a pattern. Leaves trampled in the same shape over and over. Not a game trail. A habit. I followed it to a rusted wheelbarrow left behind an old shed. The handles were stained dark, the bottom filled with dried mud. Still no blood, no tools, just the suggestion of work that had already been done. That afternoon I was back at the cabin when the knock finally came. But this time it wasn't from Dawn. It came from the cellar. There shouldn't have been a cellar. That's what I kept telling myself. Crawl space, yes, but this was something deeper. The sound came again, metal on wood, like something had been dropped. I moved slowly toward the back pantry wall. That's where the sound had come from. I pushed the shelves aside and found what looked like a fuse panel, but the screws had been replaced with magnets. It opened with a click. Behind it, a narrow wooden staircase, built at an angle, leading down. The air smelled like damp earth and something older, sour, stale chemical. I turned on my flashlight and stepped down one slow plank at a time. The walls were stone, unfinished, no insulation, just stacked rock and exposed beams. The floor was packed dirt, mostly flat, except near the far end where it sloped slightly toward a drainage pipe. There were 2 chairs in the room, one wooden one folding, a small table, a thermos, and Don. But it wasn't Don who spoke. The man in the corner was taller, cleaner, dressed like someone who didn't belong here, dark jeans, flannel hiking boots without wear. Mid-40s, military posture. His hands were empty, but his eyes were cold. He said his name was Ray Delane. He said he used to handle things for Don, that he'd kept watch from the ridge, helped clean when it got messy, took care of movement. I didn't say anything. I just stared. He pointed at Don, who was slumped against the far wall, breathing shallow. Still alive, still bleeding from the side where I'd stabbed him. Ray crouched next to him, tapped the side of Don's face. "Hard to believe a little thing like you did that much damage," he said. I raised the pistol. He didn't flinch. "You can shoot me," he said, "but you won't get out of here in time." I stepped back, kept the gun steady. Ray stood, hands still at his sides. "Don wasn't smart," he said, "but he had a system, cataloged everything, treated it like inventory. You saw the wall." I nodded once. He needed order. That was his flaw. "That's why you found him." He walked past me, picked up the thermos, took a drink. I asked him why he helped. He shrugged. Said Don found him during a bad stretch, gave him purpose. People forget how easy it is to fall into the wrong place when no one's watching. I asked if he killed anyone. He didn't answer. I asked if he watched Harper. He smiled, just faintly. She wasn't like the others, he said. She fought, not for herself, for him. I felt the grip tighten in my hand. Ray stepped closer. "You're not grieving," he said. "You're angry. That's different. Dangerous." I threw the hammer from the tool bench across the room. It caught him just above the brow. He stumbled. I turned and ran. Up the stairs, through the pantry, into the main room. I grabbed the duffel, the journal, the photo, fumbled the door open. Behind me, I heard Ray's voice. "Run then. But this ends in fire." I didn't look back. I hit the gravel hard, drove without checking the mirrors. The tree line blurred past and the road narrowed twice. I didn't stop until I reached the ranger station 4 miles out. I parked sideways in the lot, left the truck running, and walked straight to the door. The ranger saw my face before I spoke. Blood-streaked, filthy, my hands shaking. I told him to call the FBI. Told him there were bodies behind the cabin, and that one of them, my sister, was finally found. 3 hours after I made it to the ranger station, I was sitting in a concrete room with my hands wrapped in gauze. My left wrist had started to swell. I couldn't feel the bruise forming on my shoulder, but I knew it was there. A county detective named Sawyer took my statement. Mid-40s, quiet, no small talk. He didn't interrupt, didn't press. Just let me speak. I handed over the journal, the Polaroids, the metal box, the camera, the wallet with Stephen Miles's ID. I described the crawl space, the shallow graves behind the cabin, the smell inside the cellar. I told him where to find the bones. They sent in a recovery team the next morning. By then, I wasn't allowed to return to the property. They kept me informed through Marcos. He related, piece by piece. I wrote everything down. 7 sets of remains were recovered behind the cabin. 3 more beneath it buried in the crawlspace wall sealed behind false paneling. One body had been poured over with concrete, just the ribs and spine left pinned beneath rebar. They found Harper and Ryan together. Her arms were still wrapped around him, like she'd been trying to shield him when it happened. When I heard that, I had to sit down. The forensics team found the archive wall Ray had talked about. Jewelry, teeth, strands of hair, cataloged and labeled like they belonged in a drawer somewhere. They pulled evidence bags until the shelf collapsed under its own weight. The journal was confirmed to match missing persons from across 8 states. 12 couples, maybe more. A few names hadn't been reported. Some had never even been looked for. Don Blandon's rental company had never been properly vetted. Stone Elk Rentals wasn't registered under his name. Just a P.O. box, some forged documents, and a chain of shell companies stretching across 4 years. The photos on Don's old camera showed every couple who had stayed at the property. One roll of undeveloped film showed them arriving smiling, holding hands, walking up the porch steps. Another showed what came after. There was a photo of Harper and Ryan in front of the fireplace, still dressed from the wedding. Ryan's tie was loose. Harper was barefoot. You could see the flame in the hearth reflected in her eyes. The next frame showed Harper alone. Her face pale, her hands bound, the antler mask behind her out of focus, standing just to the left. I don't know how long I stared at that image. They didn't let me keep it, but I still remember the grain of the photo, the shape of the window behind her, the way she looked straight into the lens. Sawyer told me Ray Delane was gone, that a manhunt had been launched. He'd disappeared into the woods the same day I escaped. No vehicle found, no recent credit card activity, no confirmed sightings. But I knew better. Ray didn't run. He circled. That was his pattern. A week passed, then another. The news took hold. True crime blogs, national outlets, podcast hosts who said my name like they'd earned it. Some got the details right. Most didn't. They called it the Moss Hollow killings, the cabin ledger. I didn't correct them. I didn't speak. Until the day a man in a suit showed up at my motel, said his name was Daniel Whitmore, said he worked for a media group, wanted to help me tell the story right, said the platform would pay me, give me editorial control, donate a portion to the victims' families. I told him I didn't care about donations. I wanted names. I told him the story wasn't over until Ray was in the ground. He agreed, smiled a little too quickly. I signed the papers anyway. Later that night, I opened the box I hadn't touched since the cabin. Inside were Harper's necklace, Ryan's watch, a thumb drive with every audio recording I'd made, and one more letter I hadn't shown anyone. The letter from Ray. She wasn't supposed to be yours. She was mine first. I read it again, slower this time. You stole her. I should have killed you too. Next time I will. The handwriting wasn't frantic. It was steady, like a man who'd spent time watching, waiting. I knew he wasn't writing to Dawn. He was writing to me, because Harper had screamed my name, not his, because I came back when she couldn't. 10 days after the bodies were recovered, the FBI confirmed the evidence was valid. Task forces were launched in Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. Missing persons were re-examined. Cold cases reopened. They started calling Dawn a serial offender, a sexual predator, a murderer. But they still hadn't defined what Ray was. That became my job. The documentary was announced 6 weeks later. Moss Hollow, the cabin that killed. 10 parts. Interviews. Drone footage. Archival maps. I sat for one interview. That was all. The rest was theirs to shape. My part wasn't finished yet, because Ray Delane was still out there. And I knew without doubt that he wasn't done. I didn't tell the FBI where I was going. I didn't tell Marcos or Daniel or Detective Sawyer. I packed my bag like I'd done it before knife burner phone, the flip phone from the crawlspace Harper's necklace. Then I drove north. Back roads, cheap motels, no credit cards. I knew what I was doing wasn't smart, but it felt necessary. A week earlier, Ray Delane had surfaced. First, it was a blurry diner photo from Idaho. Then a pawn shop clerk in Missoula swore he'd seen a man sell a watch, Ryan's watch. By the time the FBI arrived, he was gone again. But I could tell. He wasn't fleeing. He was circling. Predators don't run. They wait. So I laid out breadcrumbs. Quiet ones. In an interview I mentioned Moss Hollow, said I might go back someday. Just a passing comment, enough for someone like Ray. 3 days later, I checked into a roadside motel. Deadbolt, no windows, facing the forest. I kept the lights on until after midnight, then shut them off and waited in the dark. The knock came at 3:14 a.m. I didn't move. Then a voice. Open the door. Evie. Not Evelyn. Evie. A name no one had called me in 15 years. I opened the door, fast, gun raised. But the porch was empty. Then I heard the breath behind me. We hit the floor hard. My gun slid across the planks. He was heavier than I expected, but slower. His grip in my hair, the slam of my shoulder into the railing, the flash of pain behind my eyes. It all happened fast. I didn't scream. I didn't speak. I reached for my boot, drew the knife, and drove it into his side. He snarled, tried to twist away. I straddled him, pressed my knee to his chest, stared into his face. She died in your arms, didn't she? I said. His eyes locked on mine. You touched her. She screamed for you, he spat. Not him. You. She begged you to come. I didn't answer. I just twisted the knife again and again until he stopped moving. Sirens split the trees. I stood up slowly. My arms and shirt soaked. I dropped the blade and raised my hands. 2 deputies rushed the porch. Drop the weapon. Hands up. I nodded. He was waiting, I said. I told you he'd come. One of them bent down, checked Ray's pulse, then stared at his face like he'd just seen something ancient. Suspect down, he said into his radio. Confirmed ID, Ray Delane, Evelyn Cross alive. Repeat alive. They loaded me into a cruiser, gave me a blanket, took my statement at the station 2 counties over. A younger detective, early 30s kind voice asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no. I want him cremated, scattered at a landfill. He didn't answer right away, just nodded. Marcos was waiting when they let me out, leaning against a cruiser, arms crossed. You good? He asked. No, I said. But I'm done running. He nodded. That's enough. Back at the motel, I opened the box again. Harper's necklace, Ryan's ring, a USB drive with every page from the journal. I picked up the burner phone and called Daniel Whitmore. It's done, I said. You sure no edits? No delays? We finish it. All of it. And we did. 6 weeks later, the documentary launched Moss Hollow, the Cabin That Killed. 10 episodes. No reenactments, just the facts. The phone recordings, the interviews, the photographs. It wasn't about me. It was about why no one listened. About the women who vanished. The ones who called for help and were told they were imagining things. The series exploded. Millions of views in the first week. News outlets picked it up. Survivors messaged me. Former tenants from Stone Elk reached out. One woman remembered her partner disappearing during a hike near the property in 2016. Another had found a false wall behind the closet, but thought it was just bad construction. And one couple had canceled their trip last minute after reading a strange online review that vanished the next day. Every message added another thread. A month after the final episode aired, Detective Sawyer called me again. The coroner's office finished the property remains, he said. The county's handing the land back. You want to know what they'll do with the cabin? I didn't hesitate. Burn it. And they did. I watched from a hill 1/2 mile away. No cameras, no press. just firefighters standing by, hoses in hand. But the fire didn't need help. The cabin went up like it was made for flames, dry pine old varnish, a decade of bleach and blood soaked into the walls. The porch collapsed first, then the roof caved in. The trapdoor in the floor fell away like it had been waiting. I stayed until the smoke turned to embers. Then I walked the perimeter alone, picked up a single photo I'd brought with me, Harper and Ryan, on their wedding day. Laughing, I placed it on the dirt, poured a little whiskey over it, and struck a match. "For you," I said, "and for the ones who never got found." The flame curled the photo inward, then swallowed it whole. The ashes stayed warm long after the light went out. Some nights I still hear the knock. Not loud, just a rhythm I can't forget. I don't live in Montana anymore. After the fire, after the final episode aired, I packed what I needed and left. No press, no cameras, no trail. Just quiet. The last time I saw Marcos was the morning we scattered the ashes behind the landfill. He stood beside me, said nothing, just handed me the box and let me decide what came next. I remember thinking how light it felt, like the weight was already gone. The remains of the victims were reburied in cemeteries chosen by their families. Some chose headstones, some didn't. But each one has a name now, a place, and that matters more than I can explain. Ray Delane's name doesn't appear anywhere on paper anymore. Not in the series credits, not in the memorials, not in the list of the missing or the caught. The detectives honored my request. His ashes went unclaimed, unmarked. Don Blandon was never formally buried. There was a brief attempt by some local historical group to preserve the site as a cautionary landmark. But when the county ordered the burn, the resistance disappeared. All that's left of the cabin is scorched earth and silence. As for me, people still recognize my voice. At airports, at diners. Once at a rest stop in Oregon, a woman approached with tears in her eyes. She didn't say anything, just hugged me, then left a photo in my palm. Her sister. Missing since 2009. I keep it in my wallet. I never went back to nursing. I never tried to stay in the spotlight either. I did my interviews, sat on the panels, answered the same questions 100 times. But eventually I realized the world didn't need another voice talking about pain. It needed someone to hold the door open long enough for others to step through. So that's what I've been doing. Quiet work, anonymous tips, research. Sometimes I mail evidence to investigators with no return address. Other times I just listen. One night last spring I got a letter, no stamp, no postmark, just tucked into the screen door at the cabin I was renting outside Spokane. Inside was a single Polaroid black and white of the woods near Moss Hollow. No note, no name, just the trees. I don't know who left it. Maybe someone who survived. Maybe someone who watched from a distance and needed to say I saw it too. The original burner phone, the one I took from behind Don's false wall, is now locked in a federal evidence room. But the contents have been archived, printed, and stored in 3 separate locations. Every name, every photo, every voice memo. Sometimes I listen to the one where Harper laughs. Just a soft chuckle through the static. She didn't know the mic was still on. That sound, that's what I carry. Not her last words, not the grave, just that laugh. That's how I know I made it out. Not because I survived, but because I remember her before she disappeared. Grief doesn't end. It just softens at the edges. And justice. It's not a clean thing. It doesn't heal the wound, but it stops the bleeding. If you made it this far, thank you. Not for listening to me, but for holding space for the ones who never got to speak. If this story stayed with you, maybe share it. So no name, no photo, no voice gets left in the dark, because silence was how they got away with it, and memory is how we keep them from doing it again.